Naruto x Boruto Ultimate Ninja Storm Connections was released in November 2023. Huge thanks to Bandai Namco for providing me a code. Before I get into it, it's important to note that the last time I played the Storm games extensively was when I made my original Ultimate Ninja Storm video all the way back in early 2022. While making this new video was a pretty big refresher, I'm playing this new one in a sort of vacuum. With this video, I'm gonna assume that you have at least a general idea of what the Ultimate Ninja Storm games are like, and if you need a refresher, I actually have a full video covering those games, and I'll link that in the description. Plus, I'm releasing a new updated version of that video really soon, which I'll also link in the description once it's out. Right off the bat, they nailed this intro. The transition with Naruto going from his young age to his Shippuden era to Boruto is sick. The understated calm title screen is a nice little bow on that intro too. And just to get the gushing out of the way, like the previous Ninja Storm games, this game is beautiful. No notes. It's got incredible animations, effects, and fidelity, especially on this PC version. To quickly explain the gameplay here, this is an arena brawler where you can select up to 3 characters to duke it out on a massive battle stage. You can run in any direction, execute attacks that can be linked into combos, throw projectiles, and charge chakra to power up those projectiles and use abilities called techniques. You can also guard, and if you're caught in an opponent's combo, you can press the guard button to use a substitution to break free of that combo, though you have a limited number of substitutions that recharge over time. Speaking of recharging over time, you also have a selection of ninja tools which have various uses, including explosive traps and small stat boosts. In previous games, you had a limited number of these per match, but Connections has reworked them to have unlimited uses, also with a cooldown. If you're in a team match, your 2 allies can be summoned at any time to use a support ability, also on a cooldown, and this is helpful for catching the opponent off guard or interrupting an attack. However, you can also switch to these allies outright too, opening up an entirely different moveset, albeit with shared HP and chakra gauges. The gameplay in Connections feels as good as ever, and I think the series kind of transitioning everything into cooldowns was actually a good change. The mechanics feel more cohesive overall, and the ninja tools don't seem to be that overpowered. Let's talk about the character selection. The characters in this game are Naruto, Sasuke, I'm just kidding, that'd take forever because who isn't in this game? Like, this list is just absurd, and I mean that in a good way. There's so many characters and variations of characters, and I can't imagine just how long it would take to try everyone. There's absolutely no way you'd run out of unique fun matchups anytime in the foreseeable future in this game, or any game with this roster size, come to think of it. I'm not gonna get too in-depth with the gameplay mechanics because for the most part, this game carries a lot over from Ultimate Ninja Storm 4. But to touch on some of the differences, first, this game added a new secondary control style called Simple Controls that you can enable from the main menu. This optional control style makes it so that your character automatically performs actions, including using a chakra dash to close the distance, executing ninjutsu and combos, and automatically using secret techniques when the opponent's HP is low enough. However, I don't think this style is for me. I feel like I lose a lot of granular control and the game is almost playing itself. I imagine this mode would be nice for someone who just wants to see flashy fights and don't really care all that much about the gameplay, and I can see it being a really valuable option for just a good chunk of people, but for me, I'm gonna keep it off. Second, every character has a level called character proficiency, which you can increase through using that character. As you level up their proficiency, you unlock rewards specific to them, including more costumes and customization items. Every character also has proficiency challenges that earn them extra experience points too. Third, there's now a built-in encyclopedia, which is really cool if you don't know a whole lot about the series or if you need a refresher on some concepts. It's a really nice way of getting up to date on the characters and the events of the story, especially if you're someone who maybe hasn't interacted with the series much outside of, I don't know, the last Storm game. Finally, something I never mentioned in the original video that existed in at least the last game is that some stages have a ring out hazard, which the game calls an abyss, and these are indicated in the map select with a little icon. However, at least in the free battle modes, you can disable these manually. The available modes are History, Special Story, Free Battle, Online Battle, and Collection. History mode is the primary story mode, and it's broken up into chapters that span basically the entire Naruto story. There are 8 chapters in the select menu, and I just have to say that this dynamic music changing effect that happens when you switch characters is one of the coolest things. Instead of explaining it, take a look. They even use this effect in the other story mode too, and while this isn't the first time these games have done something like this, I always love to see it. Whenever you play a chapter in the history mode, you restore history with a restoration status, and outside of the unique framing, it's pretty much what we've seen in the past games. However, there is a new fun little emoji reaction thing at the end of every chapter, and you can see how everyone else reacted too. It's a nice little way to make you feel part of a community, I guess, and the game gives you a little bit of in-game currency for using the reaction function. This is a bit of a nitpick, but I do worry that someday this feature will break if the game's servers ever go down. but hopefully that's an issue that's really far out, and plus it can probably be addressed with a patch that maybe takes the total reactions from before the servers shut off and just, I don't know, shows you them. Oh, and obviously the cutscenes in this mode are still incredible, but you've heard me blab about that enough already. One minor detail I like though is that the finishing scenes have context for the missions, you know, character-specific dialogue. Actually, I lied. This mode does include a scene that was done in Storm 4 that I can't believe I didn't mention the first time. It's what I consider to be one of the coolest sequences ever done in an anime video game, and I say that as somebody that's played a lot of anime video games. I don't want to show too much of it so people can actually experience it for themselves, but god, it's so good. They nailed the execution of one of the story's most significant scenes, and I'm happy to see that they didn't really change a thing in this version. Totally flawless. One gripe though is that QTEs are back during most of the major fights, and they feel like they appear even more often than they did in previous games. My biggest issue with these is that one of my favorite things about these games is the cutscenes and cutscene direction, and the QTEs make it to where I can't really focus on the scene that's happening. Instead, I'm staring at the QTE prompt and waiting for it to come up so I can get this special extra secret factor at the end. Unless I missed something, I feel like there should be some kind of toggle for these because I genuinely just want to see the scenes play out, and making me focus on something that isn't this incredible animation is doing it a massive disservice. But nitpicks aside, this mode is overall pretty solid and it hits all the major story beats that I feel like it needs to. However, I don't know how I feel about the whole rebuilding history thing that the mode's framed as. The game tells you that you're rebuilding history, but really it just feels like it's recapping the series. It'd be neat if they went for a more Dragon Ball Xenoverse style of storytelling where you're shown an alternate history or something that you have to fix. Because as it is, they could have just framed it as here's the story of Naruto, because that's literally what it is. Like Storm 4's Road to Boruto content, Special Story is a Boruto-centric original story. This time though, it seems like it's a completely fresh, probably not canon story that starts with a VR game called Ninja Heroes, no not that one, and escalates to a pretty heartfelt and earnest emotional adventure. We see a nice mixture of the original characters and the new main characters too, meaning that everybody gets a little bit of time in the spotlight. Oh, and this mode includes one of the coolest introduction sequences I've ever experienced in a licensed game. This cutscene with Sasuke versus Naruto is absolutely insane. Storm 4's story intro was already pretty wild, but this is just, The story is also paced similarly to how the Boruto stuff was paced in Storm 4, which was actually one of my favorite parts of that game, so I'm happy that they kind of remain consistent all this time later. It's really a solid mode with top-tier presentation, and it's super refreshing to get a brand new story, even if it probably isn't canon. The only bummer is that the free-roaming stuff seems to be completely gone this time. Also, it seems like you don't have to know too much about Boruto to enjoy this story, so that's a plus. I think between Storm 4 and Connections has the stronger set of story content overall, at least when it comes to what I'm looking for in story modes. While the history mode doesn't cover literally everything, it's still presented incredibly well, and the special story mode has the advantage of not being adapted almost one-to-one from existing media. Not that I have an issue with that or anything, it's just nice to have something fresh when they could have just as easily adapted stuff from the manga, or worse yet, not included a secondary story at all. Anyways, to get back to the other modes, the free battle options are Survival, Tournament, Versus Battle, League Battles, Practice, Character Customization, and Team Formation. We've seen most of these in some form before, but I did want to put special attention on the customization and collection in this game because they went extra in depth. Not only has the actual costume customization returned from previous games, but the amount of profile customization in general has expanded a lot. Because of this, there's a ridiculous number of options to customize everything from voice lines and substitution items to the default pose of every character. As far as online offerings go, there are casual and ranked matches, along with weekly challenges that you can complete to earn rewards, including stuff like finishing off opponents in certain ways or using certain techniques. A new mechanic in this online menu, at least to me, are these ninja battles. These seem almost inspired by Splatfests from Splatoon, weirdly enough, and the way it works is that you're presented two options and you have to choose one or the other to join that team. As you play, you accumulate points for your team in online battles, and at the end of each event, you're given rewards based on both selecting the most popular team and earning those points for your team. You're then rewarded with exchange tickets, which can be used to unlock more customization items. And speaking of unlocks, there's one more thing I want to note. This game is still receiving DLC and updates. As of the release of this video, the most recent paid DLC is Boruto's Karma Progression form. I'm not sure how much more support the game will get, but given that Boruto's added quite a bit of world building and characters, let alone having 2 blue vortex in active circulation, there's a pretty good roster of characters that the DLC could still tap into in the future. Overall, Connections is in kind of an interesting place. First off, I really like this game a lot. There's some quirks that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of, mainly the QTE system and the history mode coming back basically unchanged, but everything else is just as solid as it was in 4, if not improved outright. The expanded customization is ridiculously deep for the kind of game this is, and it's always fun to complete challenges to unlock more and more for the gigantic cast of characters. But given that Storm 4 came out nearly a decade ago as of this video, I guess I expected the newest entry to be more of a main numbered title with a big impact, but this game feels almost like it started out as, I don't know, show an enhanced port of Storm 4. Better yet, I think it's easier to compare it more to something like Generations or Revolution in terms of scale, which isn't bad, but those didn't have like a decade gap between them either, you know? Now, I will argue that this is a better package than Storm 4 overall, but you get my point. But it's also kind of tricky to just add and add and add, because obviously there's only so much more that you can add to a game series like this beyond just throwing more characters at it, especially when the biggest story has already concluded and the current story is ongoing. That probably puts the developers in a tricky position. Like, sure, you could just keep throwing more characters in as they're introduced in Boruto and flesh out the history mode to include every single fight from the series, but at what point does it go beyond extra content and instead just start feeling like needless bloat? I'm really curious to see how this will be handled in this series going forward, because right now, I don't know how you top this. It's kind of like the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate conundrum. Does simply adding more characters increase the quality? How do you top that, especially when nearly everyone in the series is in this game? But regardless, I think it's kind of a good problem to have. The cast is huge, there's a ton of stages, the gameplay is ridiculously fun, and there's only a tiny handful of things that I'd argue should be changed. However, something they should never change is the absolutely incredible presentation. Connections is about on par with Storm 4 in this department, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The visual style here has pretty much reached its peak, and the cutscene and animation quality is a dream. And I know that when it comes to anime licensed games, Bandai Namco will always deliver. And I promise I'm not just saying that because they provided me this copy. Look back at my earlier Ninja Storm videos, I spent half of those gushing about it too. To give one overall final opinion though, I think I would say that if you're gonna play just one Storm game, play this one. In fact, if you're gonna play just one Naruto game that's on the market right now, play this one, especially if you're a newer fan. It covers basically everything the series has to offer right now, and it goes out of its way to provide resources and context, including quite literally providing an interactive encyclopedia. Is this the best Ninja Storm game? Honestly, maybe. Everything I liked about all the previous games is in here, and you've got the entire story of Naruto at your disposal, including most major characters. I don't see any reason to go back to the earlier games unless you just really want to see their specific cinematics, but at that point, why not just watch the show? To put it plainly, this is probably my favorite Naruto game I've ever played thus far, at least as a singular package, and I can confidently recommend it to anyone who likes Naruto, this genre of game, or both. I want to give a huge shout out to Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members, including You Stay Me Go in the Played Every Game tier, along with all of these wonderful people you see listed here. I appreciate your support so much, and to you, the person watching this, thank you for sticking around. I can't wait to see you in the next one, and until then, have a fantastic day.